Okay. It's been a while since we were together, so I gotta try to remember what we were doing. I know we were working on a game, and I can't remember where it was. Was it this game too? Let's see. I remember I wasn't finished the game last time, and I tried keeping you a little late to finish up, and I didn't make it, but I got it running about 5 minutes after everybody left. Let's see, where did I put that thing? Is it in the game? Let's see here. No, that's not it. I think it was on Canvas. There it is. This is how far I got here. So we hit a square. It freezes for a moment, and then it disappears. That was just a little game we invented. There's two files that make up this little game, and here's the HTML file. And this is just for debugging the CSS. We don't really need that. You can see the border here. We put borders around everything, so star matches everything. This is convenient when you're designing things. So actually let's see, the end of the canvas goes here. All right. And then we could do something like this. Just to see what it looks like. That's what the canvas looks like. We put the canvas just in the upper left-hand corner. And I've been tinkering with this since last time. Not this particular code, but just writing games in general, using Canvas and the 2D context out of Canvas. You'll see here, where is it? This is where we load this script, a.js. We call it A for application. It's an application file. We could take a look at that. Here it is. And so, yeah, we've had a week off because of the power outages and so on. So I had some time to tinker with this on my own more. And I developed some practices that I started following. I'll show those to you. And there was a student in here that mentioned to me, pointed out to me, and I was really shocked to discover that when you set an ID on an HTML element, that ID appears in the global scope of the window object, or the global scope for the JavaScript. I was just shocked that they would do that, and I looked it up, and other developers are kind of surprised that that was done by the browser implementers. So that seems like a mistake to me, a design flaw. But it's like, what if you give? And I haven't tried this yet, but what if you? Let's do an example here. I'll do an example. Let's go ahead and make. I'll call it global. Make a directory called global. let's create a file here. And just to demonstrate how this works, let's create a we'll create say a div with an ID equal to K. And now in JavaScript, K appears as an attribute of the window object. In other words, it's in the global scope. So that'll give the same output as this. K is global. It's got a global scope. So you don't need to prefix it with a window. People do this. Programmers do this just to be more explicit. That that K is in global scope. This is so you don't have to think anymore. Say, oh, K is in the global scope. Here you're going to say, oh, what's in the where am I? Here, is K defined in this local scope or not? And so anyway, but these will give the same thing. They both show an object. Yeah, let's look at this. I'm going to open up this file. And so we'll open up the JavaScript console. And there it is, printing K here. See that? Now, if K wasn't, if this was something else, like say M, right? What's it going to show now? It'll say, anyone want to guess? When I refresh this browser window, what are we going to see here? I think it's going to say undefined. There it is, undefined. K is not defined. So apparently, when you set an ID on an HTML element, that ID value goes into global scope. I think that's the strangest thing. Now let's just take a look at this window object by itself here. It's going to print a window object, okay? Let's see what we get there. So the window object is it's big. It's got a lot of attributes. See it? Lots of attributes here. And for instance, let's find one. Like inner height, inner width. This must be the inner. This is the height here. This is the inner height. It's the height of the window that's visible. This is the inner width. So 1,179. It goes across like that. Okay, so inner height. Oh, and I was thinking of this experiment. I didn't perform it, so I thought, let's do it right now. What would happen if we named this inner width? Okay, or inner height. Also, we'll say inner height. That's what I was thinking. All right. If we label that as inner height, is it going to interfere with this? Now, before we do that, let's just print the inner height here. Okay. Let's comment that out. So this inner height, when we print this, I renamed this to XX just to get rid of it. And when we print this inner height, that's the height of this visible window here that we display things in. And it should be 178, okay? So I'm going to clear that. When I reload, it should print 178. There it is, 178. And once again, I haven't done this experiment, but I was thinking about it. I just haven't taken the time to do it. Now, what happens if we set an ID on our element with the same name of a pre-existing attribute in the global scope? What's going to happen? What's it going to print? It's going to print div. Or is it going to print 178? Or is it going to do something else? It prints 178. Look at that. So I guess, I mean, does this even work? I wonder. Maybe we'll try something like this. Watch this. Let's do this. Do styles still work? I don't know how the browsers do this. So if we define this inner height here, and it still uses the inner height that's in the window object. So what happens if we try to style that? Okay, so it's the sharp sign, inner height. Okay, and we're going to say, this is it right here. Okay, it's going to be. I want to say this is I'm a div. It's going to be black in general. So just take a look at that. There it is. It's I'm a div. It's black. I changed the color to blue. It's too close to black. Let's change it to orange. There we go. Is it going to change it to orange? I mean, I think it will. This will match against this, even though it wasn't put into the global scope. I guess the browser looks at pre-existing objects in the window in the global scope and doesn't let you overwrite anything. I guess that's what's going on here. So just to see if this works or not. Yep, there it goes. Well, we can't set any values. Like so, if it goes something like this, we'll go inner height dot what is it? Inner HTML. What's it? Inner HTML. I think that's what the attribute is. Yeah, element.innerHTML. I'll say, I'm a fish. We'll change it to I'm a fish. Take this out of here. So when we have this in JavaScript, right? Is it going to change the contents of div from I'm a div to I'm a fish? Let's see. It doesn't. Look at that. And I wonder what it does to this inner height here. Does anything get messed up? I wonder. No problem. It's the strangest thing. So I guess that's how it works. So I guess that's convenient. But you wouldn't want to do this, right? I mean, but you can. I mean, so there isn't a danger of picking an ID that matches an existing global name. So there's no danger. You're not going to screw anything up. And the browser, I suppose, it manages this for us. So we'll set that back to K. And this is now element K. This is how you might want to normally do it. So there we go, okay. Oh. There we go. So the div says I'm a div. well, we changed it to I'm a fish, so it's like, it should say I'm a fish. There it is, I'm a fish. All right, that's the experiment I wanted to do. I did it, and it's over. Okay. So I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So this game goes into global scope. So I started doing something. I started using this naming convention. You know, once you develop a naming convention, it's for your projects, then it's much easier to keep track of what's going on and to, add functionality and so on. So I use this this A here as like my application object, and I don't want to put things in. I don't want things in the global scope. I keep stuff out of the global scope. I only put one thing in global scope, and that is a variable or an object called A, referred to as A. Right, that's the reference in global scope. A. We'll give it the ID of a game. This is what I was doing. This is sort of the naming convention I developed, and we got a.js. And so here we create the application object here, window.a equals an empty object. And see where we get the canvas document, get element by ID game. Well, now it's going to be a underscore game. See, that's the name. That's the ID I gave it. Change the ID. Let's see if it still runs. It's not running. What did I do? Cannot read property add event listener of null. What line is that? 27. Oh, that's an index HTML. Sorry. So this should be this is the canvas get element by ID. I called it a underscore game. I should fix that. Yep, there we go. And so I started, well, if it's called a underscore game, I'm just going to call everything. I don't need to do this. I can refer to that directly. So I can take this line out and do a underscore game. I could take a line of code out of there. So that's what I started doing, while I was tinkering and experimenting this last week. We don't need this. This would be a underscore game. This is going to take a line of code out of there. And also we're taking control of the global scope. Yeah, canvas not defined, right? So we're going to fix that. Canvas. Yeah, I'm going to change this. I know I like refactoring. I'm crazy about refactoring. So I'm going to go ahead and do some refactoring here. This is canvas. I'm going to call this thing, this is the canvas element. I'm going to call this a underscore canvas. To me, that reads more easily. So it's a canvas. It's a canvas object. So I'm going to call it a underscore canvas. So I only have one canvas. We could have multiple canvases. I'm going to call that thing a underscore canvas. So there we go. Here, this is good over here. It should be A_canvas. That's it. Oh yes, I did that already. A_canvas. So this has got to change. This changes. This changes. There we go. Make sure everything works. Clear that. It's good. There we go. Let's take a look at how this works. I'm just doing a bit of refactoring here. So here's our canvas. And this is this is a bit general here. I'm going to change that as well. This is an ID. It's a specific canvas. I think this is better, it's more narrowly scoped in a sense than giving it a properties for a general canvas. There's only one canvas in there, but we named it A_canvas, so I'm going to use that name here. And we put a border around it, put it in the upper left-hand corner. This is where we define the canvas. We can set its width and height. This is our title. I'm going to take that out. Well, why did I have that in there? I think to show that it's when I clear this thing, I put this in here just to see whether I could have something underneath the canvas. See, when we draw, where do we draw here? There's the loop. So we do this loop. See, here's clearing the viewport. See, when we clear this rectangle here, this is the context that we take out. That's the drawing context that we get from the canvas. And when we clear the rectangle, we set the canvas to like alpha 0. So anything that's underneath the canvas is going to show through. And we didn't have to do it that way. If we set, we didn't have to clear the canvas. We could set, I'm going to set the fill style on the context of white. I'm going to call fill rect with the same dimensions here, right, which just covers the full canvas. And now this will cover up that header that's behind the canvas. So we won't see that. We won't see that header anymore. See that? Because now we're filling the canvas with white. Each iteration of this animation loop. But if we want things to show through, if we want the canvas to be transparent, then we use clear rect. We don't fill the canvas with a color. There we go. Now it's fill rect. Or clear rect. All right, just a little side thing. So I just put this in there just to illustrate that. I'll take that out now. I don't need that. Let's get rid of that. There we go. And so we define the canvas and load our application script. And the way I was breaking this up was, well, this is what I was putting in a.js was sort of like game engine code, very generic code that you would use as you're developing the game. Because as the game gets more complicated, the code's going to get large. So you're going to break the code up into separate files. Otherwise, it becomes unmanageable. So I put the sort of the most sort of the foundation code in this a.js, and then maybe some of the code I'm developing now, or code that's specific to the I don't know to this particular web page. We could reuse if we use this, we could reuse a.js for other web pages, and then put our sort of our game-specific code inside this the script element in the HTML file. So it's one way to do it. I mean, what this is going to get large too. This code will blow up too, get large. You're going to want to pull that out, put that in a separate file as well. So this is the kind of refactoring that you would normally do as you're developing. I got to stay on top of how the code is getting organized and how it grows. So let's look at this. So this is after we load this a.js, and what happens here when we load a.js, you know, it executes that JavaScript. And you have to think about that. It's important to understand that. So I'll print 2 here, okay? And when this script, when the browser processes this file and it gets to this script element, it's going to take these lines and it's going to execute them one after another. So when it executes this line, it does the same thing. When it loads this a.js, it loads this script and executes the script. And then it comes to this element, and then it's going to execute this script. Let's verify that. Let's verify that that's the case. So this is I'm going to call this 1 here. So the first thing we do, now we're in a.js, okay? And that's the file we're in. So when we load this file, loading this file means the browser is going to run it. It's going to execute these lines. So the first line it runs is going to execute this line and print 1 to the console. And then it's going to execute this. Well, what does this do? Well, it defines a function. See? It doesn't execute what's inside here. We're not calling a function here. This is very important to think about this stuff. It doesn't call it doesn't run this. Here, it runs this line. It doesn't run this line. It runs this line. See? It defines the function. That's what it does. It defines the function. And the function that it defines, and look at this parenthesis, here's the key here. This parenthesis up here, it means the function goes in, the defined function evaluates to a reference, which is then inside of this parenthesis. And this is the closing parenthesis down here. Right there. That's the closing parenthesis. This is the closing brace that the function opens up into. See, this is that's the opening brace of the function. And this is the closing brace of the function. And then this is the closing parenthesis, so that the function is created when the browser loads this script. It executes the script, it sees the function declaration, and it creates a function. A function is a JavaScript object. So it creates an object, it creates a function object. and then that function object is, we have an anonymous reference to that object that's in between these two parentheses. We didn't name the reference, we could, but we left it anonymous. But the reference is in between the two parentheses. So when we have that function reference, we have that anonymous reference to the function, what do we do with it? We execute it. That's what these two parentheses do here. It calls the function. So that's what we do. And this is a little trick that JavaScript programmers use to keep all of the local variables local and not let them go into global scope. But you don't want to pollute the global namespace. So you got to be careful not to. When you get a little program, it doesn't matter. But when the program gets big, you don't want to be just tossing stuff up into the global scope. You got to keep things as narrowly scoped as you can. So once again, the first thing we do in this, when we load the script, is we're going to run this command, and then we define this function. So that's what happens when this script runs. When we load the script, it runs the script, and then the JavaScript is going to run this script. And here we have another anonymous function here. See, this is the anonymous function. This is the opening parentheses. This is the closing brace. This is the closing parenthesis, and here we're invoking it right away. See, by doing that, we keep all this enemy function. See, this stays local. Because in JavaScript, the names are by default go into, if they're like this function, it's defined inside of another function. It's going to be scoped into that function. It won't go into the global namespace. Actually, we don't have to worry about that too much in here, because we're not really defining any variables here. Let's see. So we should, when we load this thing, we should see 1 and then 2. There it is, 1 and then 2. So now we know, okay, that's how it works. Got it. So we load this thing, and we're going to get whatever. Now, what about, and I'm going to put this in here. Watch this. This is 1.5. It's going to print 1, 1.5, and then 2. All right? Because we define the function, so when the browser reaches this point, it's going to create the function. When it creates a function, it doesn't run this. It doesn't run that line, but it runs the line when we execute that anonymous function. Then it runs it. So that's what we're doing, running it. But I want to try something else here. What's going on there? Oh, what the heck? Oh, get the caps lock on. All right, now I understand. Okay. So what I want to do is this. I want to show this to you because you'll see this more commonly. So in the window object, now this is in global scope, we have a function, add event listener. As we're going to pass in our anonymous function as an event listener. Oops, that's not the right. The event, you have to give the name of the event. It's going to be the load event. So this add event listener takes 2 arguments. It takes the type of event you're listening for, and then the second argument is the function that gets called when that event occurs. All right, that's usually called a callback function because you don't run it right away. You let the system call it for you. And so we're invoking, we're going to call this we're executing add event listener, and we're defining this function here. All of this business down here is part of this function, okay? And so we define the function, but we don't execute the function. We're going to pass it to this add event listener. And this first argument says, event listener, please call this function when the web page has been loaded. I need to make sure that we close this off correctly. Look, see, there's no parenthesis here. So we open the function there, and we have to close the function call here, okay? This add event listener, we have to close this parenthesis, and we have to close this brace. We're going to close the brace, and then we close the parenthesis right there. So that closes the function definition, and this closes the call to add event listener. So when does the load event occur? When does this thing run? Well, after the web page has been loaded. What is that? Well, once again, when I'm up here lecturing, by the way, I'm not 100% certain that things are going to work the way I want, by the way, but I'm pretty confident this is going to work. I didn't practice this before I got here. So here, when we load, we execute a.js. That's what this does. So this script is going to load that script. And it's going to execute the contents. So the contents create an anonymous function and passes it to the add event listener. It doesn't run the function like we were running the function. That's why we were printing. See, we printed 1.5. We printed 1 and then 1.5 because we ran the function when the browser loaded a.js. But it's different now because now we wrap that function, we pass that function to this event listener mechanism and told the browser to run the function when the page is loaded. So I think we're going to we'll print 1 because that's outside of the code, right? We'll print 1 because that when this thing gets loaded, that's going to run. But when this runs, it's not going to execute this code. It will not execute this. When this code runs, it just defines the function. It doesn't run the function yet. It only will run the function when the load event happens. So we're not going to print 1.5 anymore. Not right away. So we'll print the 1, and then we'll print the 2, and then when we get to the bottom of the page, and the browser's going to go, okay, the page has been loaded. I'm going to trigger the load event on the window object. And now our anonymous function will run. And now we'll print 1.5. So we should see 1, 2, and then 1.5. Well, let's see if that works. A is not defined. Anyway, it certainly worked. Like 1, 2, 1.5. Let's get rid of that bug there. Line 27. I screwed something up. Oh, it is. Oh, because A is not defined yet. See? Look at that. See? Because before, that anonymous function was running when we loaded this. Well, we don't load it until the document is fully loaded yet. So that when we get to this point in the code and the browser tries to run this line, it says, well, A doesn't exist. And we didn't call, the load event didn't occur yet. So we got trouble. We got some trouble there. Let's fix that. Got to take this out of here. This is one way to fix it, okay? One way to fix it. Put it there. Now we got to get that defined right away. We don't want to wait on that. I should clear up that error message there. Let's try it again. There we go. 1, 2, 1.5. That was another thing I wanted to talk about. What was that? Something about the order of execution. Should have tried to make a mental note, but I lost it. Let me go back to here. Oh yeah, now I remember. Let's go back to what we had. I'll leave that window out there. I'll leave this out here. Now let's get rid of this. Let's go back to what we had. Whoops. Function. Take that out. We got our anonymous function again. We're going to run it. Like that. Now we'll print 1, 1.5. Oh, I took that out, didn't I? Let's put it back in again. We'll print 1. Now we'll print 1.5. And then we'll print 2, which is here. Okay. We went back to where we were. 1, 1.5, and 2. Now this is something I haven't worked with very often, so I'm gonna, now my probability of getting things right is dropping down to 80% at this point. So this script, there's an attribute here. It's called what's called sync or async. Async. Anyone know? What is it? Async? Synchronous. So let's look that up. So it's a sync attribute. So it's JavaScript, or the script element. So I was going to say it's the script element sync. All scripts which are loaded after DOM is ready are loaded asynchronously. Let's see. Sync attribute, there it is. Here it is. This means synchronous. And what's the opposite of synchronous? What about async, right? Let me see. So if we say synchronous, this is the default. This means when the browser gets to this point, it'll load this and run it immediately. So we're going to get 1, 1.5, and 2, just like that. Okay, 80% here. I'm running on 80% now. Let's see if that works. There we go. Good. Now I think it's called async. Once again, it's been a long time since I worked on this stuff. All right. I think async. Now async means load the script and run it asynchronously. It means don't wait for the script to finish. You know, just start loading this script and go right ahead and finish the rest of this stuff. before you even get to that, right? And then after the document's been loaded, then you go back and run this. Well, the problem with that, by the way, is going to be this window object. So this needs to get defined, otherwise it's going to get that error message again. So I'm going to take that out of there. Just for now, I know it's kind of sloppy and stuff, but I'm going to put it right in there. Put it right in here. Actually, let me give it its own script element there. And it's going to put that right. The first thing I'm going to do is just define that window object, okay? And then we're going to load this file asynchronously, which means I'm conjecturing at this point. I've not done this experiment. That it'll give us the same result as if we use that load event. So async means basically run the script after the page has been loaded. So as a result, we'll print 2 first, and then we'll execute what's in here. And what's in there is 1 and then 1.5. So we should print 2, 1, 1.5. That's what I think it's going to do. Let's see if that's true. I've got about 80% confidence here, maybe 85%. It's going up a little bit. It worked. 2, 1, 1.4. See that? So you got to think about when you're doing development with web pages, when you're doing JavaScript coding, you got to think about when things run. And this is at the initialization phase. And when the page is loaded, when do things execute? Just something you got to keep track of. And there's different ways of accomplishing. Apparently, I'm demonstrating here. There's different ways of accomplishing the same effect. All right, I'm not using the load event anymore, but I'm using async here. Anyway, we got this global A, and this whole thing is equivalent to this, by the way. You don't need that. Like I said, it's just documentation. A is going to become an attribute of the window object anyway. It's the same thing. All right, let's start digging in a little more here. So here we got this application object. Let's do this. Let's do, oh yeah.
So as far as that goes, is there a difference between if you declare and initialize a variable as a equals, or if you declare it as a var?
Oh, a var?
Yeah.
Or
is there any difference?
when you go window.a?
Yeah. So
Let's see. When you do var a, it means a is just a variable. It's not a. When you do var a, when you write var a, then a is just a freestanding variable. Window.a makes a an attribute of the window object. It's different than a freestanding variable.
okay, so
Got it?
do var a equals brackets, that wouldn't be.
So var a equals. Oh yeah, that would work too. No, this is right. This is the same thing. It's the same thing. It's exactly right. Yeah, this will give us the same result. Thank you for this. See this. When you declare a variable, we're declaring this variable in global scope. So A will become an attribute of the window object as a result of this. This is equivalent to this line here. It's the same thing. Let's test that. There we go. Same thing. That's good point. Also, you could use lat, the modern. I don't see a lot of JavaScript developers using this, but I like to use it. And so that's working. Or you could use const. There we go. Same thing. They're all the same thing. Yep. You can do it like it's a style. It's just how you're going to code it up. I mean, if you're going to do it like this, then usually you'd want to do that way everywhere. So to keep it consistent, so that you could read it more easily. When you start mixing styles, then it gets a little harder to read it, right? So all of these are giving you the same result when it runs, but the readability is then the issue. Now, if you did var a down here, now this is async, right? So we could actually put this, we don't need to do it here. If we do it here, it's the same thing, because see, this script runs later. This script runs later, so this will execute right away. Oops, caps lock again. Yep, there you go. So once again, this is delayed. This is delayed. So if we do this, we'll just get errors. See, because A is not defined, so we're going to get A is undefined. Yeah.
So if you set a variable equal to a self-executing function, will it execute on that line and then you can call it again to execute it again?
Let's do that. What did I call that thing? I called it global, right? Yeah, we're going to keep it real simple here. We're just going to keep it simple. So when you say you define a function, we'll call it f, right? Maybe I shouldn't call it f. Yeah, maybe f is okay. So f, I think f is in the window object. Let's just call it a. So a is function, right? And this function is console.log a runs. So here we are defining this a, so we make it a var, say, right? Here we're defining a to be this function. It's not going to run the function. You see, it defines the function, creates the function object, and assigns, and then creates a to hold a reference to it. A becomes a pointer. A is a pointer that points to a function object, the function that we define here. But a does not run. So let's do it like this. Console.log, and I'm going to call this 1. No, I won't call it 1. I'm going to call it start. And let's call this end. So we're going to print start, and then we're going to print end, and we're not going to print a runs. I got to get that thing opened here. Here's the console. Start, end. To run a, you'd have to do this. See? All right, now we're going to launch that thing. Start, a runs, and then end. Bar is optional. Same effect. Same thing. Same thing. So many different ways of doing it.
So what if when you declare A, you make that a self-executing function?
Make that a what?
A self-executing function.
A is a self-executing function. Maybe you could do this. You want it to run right away. Maybe that syntax would work. Okay? There's because you want A to be defined, and you also want it to be invoked right away at the same time, right? So first you define it, and then you call it. Let's see if the syntax works there. I think that's good, though. That's, I'm at 85% right now. There we go. Good.
And then you can call it again.
Yeah, and then you call it again, right? Exactly. It's going to print it twice now. Okay. There it is. It's good. Good experiments. You got to think about object. In JavaScript, functions are objects. In objects, to operate on an object, you've got to have a pointer to it. That's what variables are. Variables in JavaScript are pointers to objects. Well, not all of them. Some variables point to primitive data, like numbers. Right? That's not an object. Like 1 is not an. I don't think it's an object. I can't do this. I don't think I can do this. I can't take the number 1 and add an attribute named X. That's not going to fly. I think that'll be a syntax error. So 1 is not an object. And you can set a variable to 1. So I could do this. I could say b equals 1, and then let's add a field called x to b. All right, I think that's going to be another error. See, b is a primitive data type. It's not an object. B doesn't refer to. B is not functioning as a pointer now to an object. Let me try that. So once again, let's go to the. This should be an error, and it's not. So I'm wrong. Here we go. Now my confidence is dropping. It let us do that. What the heck? Let's investigate that one. I mean, these are anomaly things, but it's good to know this stuff, right? So let's do this. If we set b to 1 and then we print b, it's going to print 1. And then we add a field to b called ddd, right? And then we'll print b again. And we'll print b.x. What is it going to print? This is a hypothesis, so we need to come up with a guess to see if we're right or wrong. We don't just run it. We're not going to learn anything. So this is going to print 1. This is going to print 1. Well, I don't know what it's going to print. What's this going to? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I never did this stuff, but so I think is that going to print ddd? Is that going to print 1? This is the one I'm not sure about, but I'm going to make a hypothesis. I'm going to say it prints 1. So it could print 1. Here is assign 1 to b. And it's going to print 1. Then we're going to do this weird thing that I thought was going to fail, but didn't. And I'm going to print B again. Does it print the same value 1 that it did up here after setting this attribute? I think it will. And then we're going to print B.x. Is it going to set DDD? So the hypothesis is 1, 1, DDD. 1, 1, undefined. Okay, I got 2 out of 3. There we go. B.x is undefined. I don't know how to explain this, but I know I would never do this. I mean, I don't have any reason to do this. I can't think of a situation where I would do this. And I don't know why the browser lets me carry this out, but it does. Just like I don't know why the browser puts IDs into the global namespace, although it does it in a way that doesn't create problems. So that's not bad. I don't want to get into this too much more here. I was thinking that when this prints 1, and then this would be undefined, so this fails. So this would fail. So basically this is here, and what does it do? It fails? I don't know what it does here. Why doesn't it give us an error message on this? Don't get it. I can't do this. Well, instead of putting, can I do that? Instead of just, B is 1, can I do this? This is, remember we tried that. That doesn't hold. That's going to fail. Yeah. Invalid unexpected token, line 6. Line 6, that one right there, unexpected token.
What if you said B is a string instead of a...
Oh, B equals 1 as a string. Yeah, I was thinking it was going to convert the 1. I'll tell you what I was getting at here. I was starting to think that when this occurred, that B would then be converted to a string, and then X would be added as a field to that string. I'm not even sure this, because strings in JavaScript are immutable, but I don't know if you can add attributes to them. Let's see if we can. So B is a string. Instead of calling it 1, I guess we'll call it 1. So this will print 1. This is DDD. Now my confidence is this will print 1, I think, and I feel more confident. I think it's going to print DDD. I think it's going to succeed this time instead of saying undefined, okay? It's a good experiment. Let's see. All right, so the hypothesis, 1, 1, DDD. All right, but I'm a little bit of a gambler here. I got my ego riding on this a bit, so let's see. Yeah, oh, undefined? What? It still doesn't work. But that's because strings are, once again, I think it's because strings are immutable. And, you can't modify a string. If you want to change, say, a character inside of a string, if you're in C, you can modify a string, right? But in JavaScript, you got to create a whole new string. You can't replace it with, the old one. You can't just modify your string. You got to replace it with a new one. But let's suppose B were to be an object. Then we can do this. Now we're going to print, when we print B here, it's going to print something like, I don't know, say something like object. Something like this. Not sure. And this will be allowed. This will print, it'll print object, something like object, but it may also show, X as an attribute. And then here, it's going to print DDD. So without the parenthesis, but I'll just do it like that. So I don't know exactly what it prints, but it prints something. It's I don't remember. So it'll say it's an object. Here it'll say, oh, now it's an object, but it also has an attribute called X. And here it'll just print DDD. No errors there. Let's see. There it is. See, this is where we print B. There's nothing in there, right? Oh, actually, what the heck? It goes backward in time. You know, isn't that weird? You see, when I expand it, it's this. What it prints here is the state of the object when I ran the console log command. But when I expand this branch, I think what it does is it goes out and gets the object and reads it to find what's inside of it. So it's all kind of weird. What the heck is that I for there? Oh, see, value below is evaluated just now. You see that? Yeah, what?
After you declare the object, can you assign it a primitive value?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so here, watch this. We print this object here, okay? Let's do that. We're going to do that right now. We define B, and we print it. And then we're going to assign it a primitive value 1. All right. What happens, and then when we print B here, we're just going to print 1. Now, let me explain this. Here we create an object which is empty. And then we create a variable named B and set it, and it is a pointer to that object. So B becomes a pointer or reference. Maybe use the word reference. B becomes a reference to this empty object. And we print the empty object here. Let's just give, the brackets. And then we assign, see, we're not modifying the object. We're modifying the pointer. It's don't point to the object. Point to the primitive value 1 now. We're not touching the object. We're touching the reference. We're touching the variable that contains the reference to the object. That's the thing that's changing, not the object. Whatever happens to this object, by the way? Oh, let's check this, first of all. What happens to B? What happens to the previous contents of B? It gets garbage collected because our code no longer has a reference to the object. So that's when garbage collection comes in. See, you've got this thing called a garbage collector. In C, you use a new operator and you create things, you allocate memory. And if you just lose your pointer, you get a memory leak. There's no garbage collection. But in JavaScript, if you lose a reference to stuff that you created, the engine says, whoa, there's no more references to this object, so I'm going to delete the object. That's called garbage collection. So this will be collected by the garbage collector. Anyway, let's test this. This should print,
Could you do something like give it a member variable, make a reference to the member variable, and then ditch the reference to the...
Let's do that. But hold it, because we want to finish this experiment. This is real quick. This prints the object, assign it to a primitive variable. Now it's printing 1. And we're going to come back and do that experiment. There it is. Good. Okay, so B. So you're saying have a member variable, say X, that equals 3, something like that. Oh, that's the wrong syntax. So B is an object with the value, with an attribute X. So we could print B.X. Right? That'll print 3. All right, let's check that. Okay. Prints 3. By the way, this is equivalent to doing the following. Like, comment that out. That is equivalent to the following code. Define an empty object, and then attach a B to it, attach an X attribute and assign it to 3. Assign 3 to it.
In that case, is the object declaration even necessary? Didn't you just say B?
So in other words, can you take that out and just do this? No, then you're going to say B is undefined. Let's take a look. Should say undefined. B is undefined, something like that. B is not defined. So you have to create the object. This will print, let's test it. This prints 3. There it is. So this code and these lines equivalent. Once again, it has to do with your style. Your coding, you got to understand, you're going to have thousands of lines of code probably when you get done, unless it's a small job. And you're going to get lost. I mean, you're going to be up all night and you're going to be lost in your own code. And you're going, I wish I created good names. I wish I didn't modify all my patterns all over the place. And now the boss is going to fire me because I can't get this in by the deadline. So you pick your style. You like it like this, You like your code to look like this, or you like your code to look like this. Well, you can mix these too. I mean, that's no big deal. All right. What do we do? You want to look at the game code a little more or something else? Are we over? We're over. We're done. Holy cow, that went so fast. Holy cow. All right, that's it.